People in our own backyards are hurting. There are insecurities around food, economics, mental health, access to justice, healthcare, and our society continues to become more divisive. But there is hope. Right here in Chicagoland, there are people and organizations who are on the front lines, working to bring about positive and transformative change. Each week, we're going to meet some of these agents of change and examine how they are spurring innovative ideas and finding solutions to push our society forward in a more just direction. I'm Sufyan Sohel, and this is Change Agents. Good evening. The legacy of slavery, racist Jim Crow laws, and hateful lynchings have translated into modern-day mass incarceration and the disproportionate imprisonment of Black people. Racial discrimination and bias have been ingrained in our criminal, legal, and law enforcement systems from its earliest days and continue to pervade every level of our systems today. Studies have shown that communities of color, specifically Black and Latinx people, are more likely to be stopped, searched, and suspected of a crime even when no crime has occurred. Racial bias in policing contributes to the wrongful incarceration and conviction of innocent Black people and is also seen in arrest quotas, the use of surveillance technologies like facial recognition software, predictive policing tools, and gang databases. Research also shows that strong and conscious racial biases associating Black people with criminality persist, which often become the first step towards wrongful conviction. My first guest tonight is the program director of the Illinois Justice Project, an organization that works to advance policies and practices that reduce violence, decrease prison recidivism, and make the legal system more equitable. He spent his career advocating for our most vulnerable, including serving as Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Legislative Affairs at the Safer Foundation, where he aided people with arrest and conviction records to re-enter our society. I am so pleased to be joined by Ahmadou Dramé. Ahmadou, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I'm really excited for our conversation. I laid out just my own thoughts on the inequities of our criminal justice system. And when we met last week, you were sharing your own perspective of that, and I would love for you to share some of those with our viewers.
Certainly. I think it's quite clear that there are a number of racial disparities that exist within the criminal legal system. If you were to look at the population of Chicago, for instance, which is virtually 1/3 Black, white, and Latino, and then go to Cook County Jail or go and see who from Cook County is going into the Illinois Department of Corrections, what you'd see is that there's a disproportionate share of people who are Black and brown who find their way into those systems. And so we do see those racial inequities, and there are a number of consequences associated with those inequities or punishments, permanent punishments that are associated with those disparities that exist within the criminal legal system as well.
Like what?
So for instance, I work in really at the intersection of the criminal legal system itself and people reentering back into community. And at that particular intersection, we see in every institution within society a number of challenges that people face when trying to successfully reenter after they've been involved with the criminal legal system. Issues and challenges associated with access and housing, issues and challenges associated with finding gainful employment and being able to become upwardly mobile in the economic sense. Challenges repairing broken relationships that maybe were stronger prior to entering the criminal legal system, and really just finding community after individuals have been involved in the criminal legal system. And so we have, I would say, a landscape of laws, policies, traditions, attitudes that exist out in community that just make it very challenging for one who's had involvement with the criminal legal system to successfully transition. I
mean, I know society puts a lot of stigmas around those who have been incarcerated. It's a label that they hold forever and ever and ever. But certain communities are held, I feel, that label sticks with them more than others.
Certainly.
So why would you say our Black communities face that a lot more than others?
Yeah, I would call it the scarlet letter. Maybe that's an equivalent. But you know, we should not forget that racism exists in our society, and the history of mass incarceration is really grounded in the targeting of primarily Black and brown men, but increasingly these days, Black and brown women. And so it's important that we work towards creating a criminal legal system that's more just, but we have to be mindful in our strategies, in our approaches that we take to address these challenges, that it's important and critical that we take a racial equity lens to our work as well.
You say we got to put a racial equity lens on this. Like, what are the shortcomings right now in our current structures in place that are not using?
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting time to be asking that question, especially in a city like Chicago, coming off of the mayor's race that we have just seen. In so many respects, the mayor's race and a key portion of it was what does it really mean to bring safety into communities? And the candidate who won, Mayor Brandon Johnson now, really campaigned on a platform that forces us, I think, as a society, certainly people living in the city of Chicago, to reimagine what it means to bring about safety. And what approaches do we choose to use in that context? So we see, and will likely see, in this administration, and I would say in direct response to your question, approaches that are really aimed at getting at the root causes of violence, as opposed to having a more law and order approach. So what does that mean? It means reaching people who are in crisis and helping them get the support that they need.
And not just hiring more police officers.
Yes, I would agree with that. Okay. Not just hiring more police officers. Reaching people who are homeless and housing them and providing them the support. Reaching people who are in need of economic opportunities and creating a ladder up for them. And so those types of approaches, as well as really trying to divert and deflect people away from the criminal legal system, are some of the things that we would want to see in order to do just that. And I would say that that is how we create a more equitable society and more equitable or fair treatment of people who are living in Black communities as well.
That's a lot of the work that you're doing at Illinois Justice Project. Tell me a little bit about that.
Certainly. So we are an organization that advocates, as you so eloquently put at the top of this segment.
Thank you.
We are an organization that advocates for policies that reduce crime, create safer communities, and create a more just criminal legal system.
So a lot of things you were mentioning that the city should do, you're already pushing out there legislatively and policy-wise.
For sure. And so we do that in a number of realms. We do that in the youth space. We do that in the adult space. We do that on the front end of the criminal legal system. We've had my colleagues and I advocate for changes within the court system. And then we also look at the carceral system, as well as the conditions that exist within community to try to foster a more equitable community, more equitable society, but certainly a fairer criminal legal system as well. So we do it all. In my work, in particular, I work in the reentry space largely. I work a great deal at the intersection of housing and reentry, which has been an issue area where for years we have struggled to make a significant amount of progress. And by progress, I really mean getting government more involved in the creation of opportunities for people to find housing and access housing. And so that's been a great deal of the work that I've been involved in addition to other areas as well.
What would you say is the biggest barrier in getting your work done? Is it government? Is it the communities? Is it access to resources?
Yeah, it's not just one thing.
Sure.
It's a combination of things. We, as a society, have not invested enough in creating a pathway back home for people. And I would argue that government has a critical role to play in that. And so a significant portion of my time and work is spent trying to persuade, encourage government to do just that. We have not really done, I think, the work that's needed to educate our neighbors and our sometimes our families and friends on the impact of having a record. The social contract in our society is if you commit a crime, are convicted of a crime, you serve your time and the punishment should end there. But instead, what we have are a series of laws, policies, beliefs, attitudes that really punish people long after, they have served their time. And so what we try to do is address those things through storytelling and narrative change, through education. So we convene a number of tables in our work where we engage leaders in government, individuals who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system, people who are formerly incarcerated, community members, advocates, direct service providers, people from the private sector as well. And we, through our convenings, use those as a vehicle to educate and to foster change. And the theory behind that is if people know better, then they will do better and create opportunities for people.
That's so great. Do you have any numbers? Do you have that programs like yours and the impact they have on community?
Yeah. Recently, we had an opportunity to collaborate in the provision or in a pilot program that was intended, that aimed at providing opportunities for people who were exiting the Illinois Department of Corrections after they were incarcerated for sure, but in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The program itself provided wraparound support services and a housing subsidy for people who were formerly incarcerated and who were reentering communities during the pandemic. And what we saw was that we achieved a 20% recidivism rate through that. That's compared with the state's 38% recidivism rate at the time. We were able to serve 120 households,
wow,
which is important. And I say households because, people who are exiting prison are no different than you and I. They have family members and people for whom they are responsible for and accountable to. And so we were, critical and really focused on providing that support to households because, you may have a mother, you may have a daughter, you may have a sister, you may have a sibling, a parent, what have you, who relies on your support as well. But there are 4.1 million people in this state who have an arrest or conviction record. A lot of people don't know that. And it's a significant number. It amounts to about 41% of the working age adult population. And, that's significant. That is nothing, to just move past as though that's a small number. It has huge implications for our ability to employ people in our workforce. Obviously, I've underscored some of the challenges associated with being able to provide housing for people as well. But those are just a few numbers.
And what keeps you doing this work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it really dates back to high school for me.
Yeah.
I had an experience where I was suspended from high school. It was during my senior year. And, a teacher accused me of doing something that I didn't do. And I went through the process, imagine 2 weeks before the end of your high school tenure, of being told, at least initially, that I wouldn't be able to graduate with my classmates, that I couldn't participate in the regional track and field championship, and that I wouldn't be able to go to prom. All because a teacher who was bitter chose to write me up and get me suspended, and the policy at the time was that if you were suspended during the second semester, you weren't going to those things.
Yeah, for sure.
And an important moment in my life took place following that event. My classmates who were in the class with me, they drafted a letter on my behalf and they sent it to the school board and our new superintendent and basically refuted everything that I was suspended for. And then my mother reached out to the local NAACP chapter in Evanston, who advocated and organized on my behalf to get me reinstated back into school. And so after about 3 or 4 days, we mobilized quickly. After about 3 or 4 days, I was reinstated back into school.
That's so great.
And I wasn't able to participate in the track and field championship, but I was able to go to prom and I was able to cross the stage with my classmates.
Priorities,
But what I learned from that experience was that, okay, I'm a black man now in this world. And there are gonna be times when people with power, adults, will do things that are harmful to my life. And when I got to college, I went to DePaul. I took a class with a woman named Valerie Johnson called The Politics of Urban Education that changed my life. And it gave me a framework for really understanding the world. And what I learned in that class and was able to process from my high school experience was that it was the first time that I experienced institutional racism directed at me personally. Sure. And in that class, before our 10th week, I resolved that I would dedicate my life to making sure that people don't feel like me, that people don't feel powerless, especially black and brown people, and those who are at the margins of society. And you know, when I think about mass incarceration, when I think about who's been impacted by that in the war on drugs, it's largely black and brown men. Sometimes, as you mentioned in your lead, people who society chooses not to believe, and sometimes people who have paid their punishment already and no longer deserve to experience it after paying their debt to society. And so that's where it stems from for me. It really is about restoring hope and opportunity to the community, and that's a bit about why I do it.
No, we thank you for your work, and I hope you continue to instill the same hope that you found into all those that you're serving. Thank you so much for your work.
I appreciate it.
We'll be right back with our next guest.
It's still honest, it's still thoughtful, and it's still definitely Chicago.
3, 2, 1.
Join me, Darius Hillman, for a brand new spring season of In the Arena, where we're bringing you compelling conversations with some of the most fascinating people our city has to offer, right here on CAN TV 19, on cantv.org, and the new CAN TV Plus app.
Welcome back. My next guest tonight is committed to eliminating barriers and creating opportunities for those formerly incarcerated. I am so pleased to have with me this evening Tony Lowry, Vice President of Reentry Housing Services with the Safer Foundation. Tony, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Extremely pleased, happy anytime I can have the opportunity to talk about issues associated with reentry.
Yeah, so you have your own story to share. Let's start with that.
My story started off as a kid growing up in civil rights era, being in high school when King was killed. Looking back to my travels as a young person going to Mississippi, the county where my family came from was the county where they had the Emmett Till trial. So not really putting everything together in a young age and looking at why my mother told me, say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, to those white folks when I went down to Mississippi. And just looking at the history and coming up and really being self-reflective, because things that I'd done to be engaged in the criminal justice system were by choice, were by opportunity. I think by thinking I had an opportunity. Went to a great high school, went to college, finished college, was an insurance sales agent, Fortune 500 company. But my family's history was illegal drug sales. My father had been in a federal correctional system, and one of the biggest moments of my life was going to the train station when he was paroled, when he came back home. When I got out of college, looking at opportunities, and this was a time where there wasn't a lot of opportunities. I think the job that I took out of college was the same job that I worked during high school, unloading boxcars, moving furniture, things like that. Got an opportunity to get into the insurance field, but still looking for more, you know. So that search for more led me to an opportunity that my father really didn't want me to be involved in, but just him seeing me getting involved in creating dangerous situations for myself, I felt that he said, here, let me grab him before something happens. In the beginning, it just happened to be illegal work. In the beginning, it was wonderful. You know, it was financially lucrative, ringside at the fights in Las Vegas. The NBA ball players were my customers. And again, nobody could have told me that this can go wrong.
Sure.
But a funny thing happened on the way to becoming a millionaire, that the drugs I was selling, I started using. So the story took a very, very ugly turn. I always say when I'm in prisons talking to guys is thank God for the arresting officer, a kind, caring judge, and my sister, who was a correctional officer, who had already reserved a treatment bed for me in the correctional center because she knew I would be getting locked up again real soon. In treatment, I remember my mom coming home. I was fortunate enough for an old case to have some money on the books where I could rent me my own apartment. So I remember going home, asking my mother, okay, Mom, where's the, you got the check? She said, no, I can't find it. I said, okay, here, just take me back to the treatment center. When you find the check, put it in the bank.
Yeah.
You know, I'm cool. And for her, this was kind of a transformative moment because just months before, I was running around really on a insanity trip where wouldn't listen to anybody, couldn't get control of my life, wouldn't listen to anybody to help me. And now having found peace through that therapeutic process was truly amazing. That led me to treatment, getting clean, and starting the work. And my work began in public housing communities.
Okay.
Where we had a drug prevention program, where we provided treatment opportunities for the parents, but we were in the schools with drug prevention programming. We had a staff of 75% of our staff were public housing residents, and that was under the auspices of Dr. Carol Adams, who later became head of the Department of Human Services. And we were combating drugs and alcohol through rehabilitation and education. And one of the biggest moments I had at that time of doing the programming in the school, and I would go door to door in the buildings and just knocking on doors, giving people the information. And I knocked on one door, and one of the young ladies answered the door. She said, oh, that's Mr. Lowry. Mama, that's Mr. Lowry. We got her mother into treatment, and her mother has stayed clean for over 20 years.
Oh, that's great. And I just love to hear from you briefly, like what's so important about reentry programs?
Well, it's giving guys an opportunity to make amends to themselves and to their families, and really looking at the backdrop of reentry.
Sure.
I always say that racism is America's greatest institution. It's
100%.
fulfilled through our criminal justice system, through mass incarceration, through the attack on black and brown communities. And then when people get out, that's the permanent punishments that they face, that they don't know how to navigate through. So the work that I do is really starting to have that conversation in the correctional setting, going into prisons for the reentry summits and really challenging guys to open their eyes and to get a plan coming out the door. Because we talk about the seamless transition from institution to community. The people who come out the door with a plan are going to be successful. The people who don't, because again, most of our people are coming back into 7 communities which are high crime, high poverty, lack of opportunity. So it's so easily to get back on track as far as what you used to do. I coined the phrase that fresh air causes amnesia, because again, a lot of people come out and they forget all the pain. They forget everything they said they were going to do while they were inside. So that's why we have to really connect with people within that first 60 days to really give them an opportunity to show them the support they have that will really turn their lives around. The work that we do is life-changing.
Yeah.
But again, we have to get people engaged, involved. We have to listen and have that psychic change of mind, because again, you're used to criminal activities. All your friends are engaged in criminal activities. So again, to break that yoke and to get our people fulfilling, committed to that process. And I share my story because I had to make that commitment. And I try and simplify it because again, when I'm talking to a guy who's just getting out here, what are you going to do to stay free? You know, that's your bottom line. That's your commitment every day.
Well, thank you so much, Tony, for sharing your story and your incredible work with us. I encourage our viewers to check out both Illinois Justice Project and Safer Foundation. We will be right back with this week's Change in Action.
I'm your host of Tweenish. This week on Tweenish, we'll be talking about mental health with a special guest, Miss Sylvia. What can tweens do to have good mental health?
Really having a good support system of adults that you can bounce ideas off of.
You can watch my show Friday nights, 7 o'clock on CanTV 19, CanTV.org, and the new CanTV Plus app.
In Chicago, we have so many incredible organizations looking to bring positive change to our city. This week, in Change in Action, we have the Touch Gift Foundation working to provide relief to our unhoused and our hungry.
I'm here to represent the Touch Gift Foundation. This was the brainchild of Kiona Owens back in 2018, when she decided to take her personal savings and try to combat the poverty mindset that lives in our city day to day. Since its inception, she's helped over 10,000 households, not only with just hunger and homelessness, but literacy and education that are definitely needed throughout our city. I really think that she does a good job with engaging communities such as Inglewood, Woodlawn, and Grand Crossing. I personally feel invested because I'm originally from Woodlawn. So to go through these neighborhoods and try to give back and contribute back to the communities that were once where we come from, it means a lot. I enjoy the community interaction. You get to see the engagement of our organization as we fill the bellies and the minds of the people who are definitely in need of it, and it really helps to feed your soul. Personally, I am a returning resident. I spent 24 years in incarceration, and I was looking for a way to give back to the community. Kiona and I go back about 30 years. We were childhood friends, and she reached out to me, asked me what is it that I needed, tried to ensure that my acclimation back to society was seamless, and she was very helpful and instrumental in that. And so I was asking her, how can I help return the same feeling back to people who are in my position and give back to the community? So Kiona basically invited me to go out with her and help, just to see what it is that they do, how they help the community, and I just fell in love with it. Doing this work really, like I said, helps reinvigorate the soul. It makes you feel like you are really making an impact to society, and this is what we're supposed to be doing as returning residents.
Thank you, Touch Gift Foundation, for your incredible work. Angela Davis wrote, "Prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear human beings. Homelessness, unemployment, drug addiction, mental illness, and illiteracy are only a few of the problems that disappear from public view when the human beings contending with them are relegated to cages." I am so inspired by the work of Ahmadou and Anthony and their efforts to make our justice systems more equitable and to support and create opportunities for those formerly incarcerated. They are committed to combating stereotypes, reform of our criminal justice system, and advocating for policies that make our communities safer while reducing recidivism among our youth and our adults. Thank you both for your work and for your unyielding commitment towards serving our communities. I look forward to exploring ways that we can all support your efforts further. Each week on Change Agents, we have discussed the many issues facing our neighbors, the challenges and bias they experience, the stigmas that we collectively may place upon them. But like my guests tonight, we each have the power to open our hearts and to advocate for change, to improve the systems that hold the residents of our communities back, to bring positive change to the lives of those around us. We can all be change agents. Let us all be change agents. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will see you next week.